Hello! Hello everybody, welcome back. Hello, back from your Facebook break. Facebook grape, that's a scary idea, isn't it? I didn't say Twitter deliberately. You can tweet during my talk if you like, still using the hashtag I'm at Exeter Academic. Please be nice. So basically, hello, my name is Alex Louch and I'm the Vice President Academic Affairs at the Students' Guild here in Exeter, which is our student union. We've just got a different name because the Queen opened us or something like that. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk at the conference today. I understand this is sort of the only student talk today, and sort of you don't often get to speak to many of the student unions in this environment, so I'm very happy that I'm here, and I hope you find it interesting for the next sort of 20-25 minutes, and then some questions. So, what I'm planning to talk about. Firstly, I'm going to look into the notion of partnership between students and universities and the learning community, and then some very practical ideas on how to engage students in the learning spaces agenda. I'm then actually going to ask why. Why do students need to be involved? Should they just be taught at, or should they be involved in the whole process of developing learning spaces? And then what students actually want, which I've got experience of clearly here in Exeter, but I think hopefully a few of those things apply elsewhere as well. And then some ideas on the future, which is very exciting as well, so we can have a discussion about that towards the end. So, first of all, partnership theory. So I don't know how many people have heard of partnership ethos. Anyone? No, that's exciting. I think those in Exeter probably have, because they've heard me banging on about it all the time. So they've had to. So the Manifesto for Partnership was a piece of work that was launched by the National Union of Students in 2012. And it basically sets out the best practice for universities, student unions and their students to work together in partnership. And now in Exeter, we're really lucky that the university really value the Students' Guild, and the Guild really value the university, and students play into that as well. So I know partnership isn't necessarily strong across the piece. I know in some places there's some difficult relationships with student unions, but I also know that regardless of that relationship and the system, there's an opportunity to work together with student unions. And there's definitely an opportunity to co-create learning spaces with students on the ground. So there's one thing that I really want to highlight specifically about partnership, and I think that's the structure of student representation. So it's all well and good, a guild or a union having a really, really good relationship with the senior management at the university. Particularly the presidents and the vice presidents, particularly here in Exeter, we have a fantastic relationship with the Vice-Chancellor's executive group. But I think it's the students sort of at the bottom of this pyramid. So in every students' union, there's a representative structure. By quality assurance code, there has to be. And so this course reps in every discipline of Exeter and student unions around the country, and I think that's where the partnership is most important. So I can't really stress the importance of learning spaces team in Exeter, what they do here, and what could work elsewhere, and going out and speaking to those course reps, because they're trained, they're elected, and they really want to give feedback on everything involving learning spaces. So get out to a course rep meeting, find out who the relevant contacts are in the student union, and I'm just a massive advocate of that at that level where partnership works best. So, on that theme, in Exeter we've kind of taken the next step along that journey, and we've managed to pull together exactly what our students want from the student union. We've called it the Visions for the Future of Education, and you can have a look yourselves if you like. I'm sure a link will go around after this, or I'll post it on Twitter or something. So it's issue.com/ExeterGuild. And the point here is that representation on learning spaces isn't necessarily just in one little neat box on its own. So when students are giving feedback and then student unions collate it, it's often at a discipline level. So it's again reinforcing this notion of disciplines in every university where the feedback is. And that's where the issues might arise. So again, I'll just speak to the student union, find out what students have been saying about learning spaces, because it's definitely been beneficial in Exeter, and I think it could be elsewhere as well. Having said that, there's a whole host of other ways to engage students beyond the student union as well. And I'm going to make a bold statement that the Vice-Chancellor made, Steve Smith, a while ago here. So I firmly believe that email is pretty much dead for students. And the students I know here have inboxes with literally thousands of unread messages. If it doesn't have their academic or their lecturer's name at the top of it, or the word results, then they're not going to read it. And I think looking to the way forward, we really need to address that as a key communication point between staff in universities and students. And I think learning spaces groups, you're often the key opinion formers, way ahead of the game on this thing. And I think using Twitter and Facebook in particular is absolutely critical to engaging students in our work. And particularly if there's a really good Facebook page, incentivised with some budget as well. I think you can't underestimate that as being important. Students are increasingly reluctant to do things for free, or maybe they always were. And I think you'll get far, far more responses and engagement. So also on Twitter, not just tweeting to sort of 100 followers, but trying to engage with other people with larger followings. We have a good relationship here, so whenever we want a survey to be properly publicised, I have a larger following and the Guild have a larger following than the university central accounts. And between that, we can get a really wide reach by using Twitter as a communications tool. So I also think, having said all that, genuinely the best way to speak to students remains face-to-face. And this year, Elaine and I, here in Exeter, did some feedback on a new learning space that we're developing this summer. And literally, we went into the forum down there, we went into the street, and we saw hundreds of students walking past at the busiest time of the day. We could literally grab 100 students and say, can I have 30 seconds of your time? What do you think about this space? And I think what that then causes, you realise that students really, really care. And they don't necessarily care for a learning spaces email at the bottom of their inbox. They really care for something visual. They care for the designs, and they love to know about the look and feel of where they're going to spend actually quite a lot of time at university. And they see that all over other areas of life, and they want to see that from their learning spaces as well. So directly from this forum session, our student media, who were just there, just came up and said hello, ran with a news space story on their online website and then in print as well. And it actually spread a buzz about the whole new space across the campus. So I think actually getting out face-to-face can have a whole host of other impacts as you go forward. Now, I also wanted to make a quick thought on consumerism at this point. And I think it's a pretty dirty word across student unions and across the Guild, but it's one that's definitely increasingly difficult to avoid. So the general student point is, I want value for my £9,000. And I think that learning spaces are probably the most under attack from that statement, in comparison to things like teaching and administration and other areas of university life. It seems that it's the most basic area where students say, I've paid a lot of money, why is my library full all the time? Or I've paid a lot of money, why is my lecture at 7 p.m? Or why is that wall not as sort of painted recently as it could be? Or why does this technology not seem to work in this lecture theatre? And I think they're right, but we need to be careful about that, because the university really is a community, and we need students to actually own their spaces as well, so they aren't simply branding the university as a good or a bad product. It's an experience that they share in too with the whole academic community. And the more that learning spaces can involve students actually as partners in designing, and messaging learning spaces, I think the better things can come from that. So these complaints, sort of the basic moans and grumbles, but that actually reach quick complaints, are also only going to increase over the coming years. Matt said in the last talk, students are the first to complain, and that is certainly the case because it's becoming easier and easier to complain. So on that thought, one last sort of idea on this partnership notion. So in the Guild, we've got a new space being created. You might hear some of the banging and tearing down walls over that side of the building. That's why it's happening at the moment. And I've been fortunate from the Guild perspective to actually lead from a student perspective on the project. And I've managed to sit in every meeting with the builders and the designers and the budget holders to really challenge them on what they're doing and to just answer that question when everyone goes, well, when everyone doesn't say anything, they just ignore it because the student actually isn't in the room. So I'm just throwing a question, an idea. Why not do this on every learning space? And I genuinely believe it would be incredibly beneficial even to employ a student for a few hours a week just to lead on a project or a space development. So they can be the ones in the question, in the meeting, asking the tough question. We find, particularly in Exeter, students have quite a lot of clout in things like budget meetings. It's often helpful to have that partnership. So if I am potentially meeting a senior member of university staff and we're on the same page of what we really want from a learning space, that students can actually be behind that and make a big difference on that. So that's partnership. And just 2 points on what, in Exeter at least, is important to students, and I think this is something that applies across the board. The first one, I've put PGRs here, so postgraduate research students, but I think it applies across the piece to every student, is that they're very, very different. And I think sometimes we can underestimate that we're just looking at undergraduates as our only base. So this year, our PGR students have had a completely different set of issues with learning spaces to undergraduates, and they've got completely different priorities, and these need to be supported equally, not necessarily, oh, we'll deal with the undergraduates first and then come to the PGRs, because it doesn't work like that. And the Postgraduate Research Experience Survey, in particular, is an absolutely fantastic marker for these sorts of issues alongside the NSS. I think sometimes we get a little bit over-focused on the National Student Survey as a method of feedback, but I'd definitely say there's a lot more surveys out there for these different groups of students. And as I've said previously in Exeter a lot, the PGR identity, which is a critical point, is to their department. So often they're more reluctant to involve themselves in the central sort of things coming out because they're a lot more aligned to academics. So it's just highlighting that need to treat every group of students differently. And the second thing is just a plug for the very small things. I know this is an absolutely fantastic room. I know the room next door is absolutely fantastic as well. Big money spend and makes a massive difference to what students think of Exeter. But at the same time, there's a lot of really small things about our learning spaces that are the hygiene factors that students really say, oh, you know what, that's really annoying and they haven't thought about me there. One which is a very personal bugbear is plugs, and I'm so happy I got this in here today. But I think every learning space needs a plug, and that's just standard practice now, to walk around a learning space in the library and not be able to sit down with your laptop. It's just a critical thing, and it's something that I raised at the start of the year, just went round for a quick look and said, we need to get plugs in all of our learning spaces, and that's managed to happen with the sort of clout that we've managed to gather as a student body this year. So there was 150 without plugs in the library, and now the vast majority of those have been solved. And it's one of those things that just solves an issue for students, and they really think, no, my institution really cares about me. So some of the results we've managed to have working in partnership this year. Like I was saying, there are some big things. We've got 2 new study spaces. We've got a new one above the terrace going in, and we've got one on St Luke's as well. Also, one idea that came from the student body last year was just to create an app, because there is so much underutilised space in Exeter. And it's just making it really easy for students to see, oh, this room's empty, I'll go in for an hour, that's fine, I've got a lecture in an hour's time. So it's literally green, orange, red. If it's going to be used in an hour, it's orange. And students use that, will hopefully start using that a lot more in September. Another very simple thing is mobile print, which is coming in 2015. And I think this year as well, we've also been able to strengthen that partnership for the years going forward so that there is a general understanding that students will be involved in a lot of the learning spaces discussions. Now, the final thing that I wanted to just briefly touch on, which could be just a topic of debate, jump in if anyone's interested, was just around the future. So to back Matt's point up, I think that students are increasingly intolerant and impatient about learning spaces, particularly in IT. And as Matt says, with these tables, the first thing students, they'll get really frustrated and they'll go off it straight away because there is an expectation that everything that is as quick as an iPhone or everything is as quick as the technology they're using day to day, which is very difficult to combat. So I think the more students can have those quick feedback mechanisms, the better as well. And then another point around procrastination. So I don't have the answer to this, and I know this may not necessarily be the direct responsibility of the SCHOMS group, but I think that it's something that everyone should be starting to think about, because you stand at the back of a lecture theatre now, and if you look down the back of the rows, if you're an academic, you'll definitely get a scary sight, which is a lot of the screens just aren't relevant to the discussion that's going on at all. And I think we actually need to think about that, because students aren't giving the full attention and aren't engaging in their studies if they're sat on Facebook as well as watching a lecture. I think I've made my consumerist point. And finally, is just to reiterate, I'd definitely say get out into the disciplines and find out what students in the disciplines want. These meetings are happening between students and academics. Why not learning spaces? Why not professional services when they're all there to give feedback directly? So that's my general thoughts. I just thought about any questions, and if there aren't, a potential discussion around some of the barriers and the opportunities in engaging students in learning spaces as well. So yeah, just opening it up to the floor. I think this is the eternal issue with student unions, is that you can often get a wildly different priority of VP education year on year. I would personally say get in touch with student union staff as well, if you possibly can. There is membership services staff within student unions, and often representation staff. I know in Exeter there's a strong link between our representation department here and learning spaces, so that you can work on that longevity. And also I'd say just get in the VP's ear as soon as they get into office, and try and set up a joint meeting between the two of them, because there is normally a handover period, and I'll definitely be indoctrinating my successor, so sorry, advising my successor. Mm. I think so. Yeah, I think Twitter is critical at the moment, and I think the more there's a lot of students not on Twitter still, so I think that's still an area for development. Also, the point on Facebook, I think it's because everyone's mums and dads are on Facebook now, which is definitely a deterrent. But there are definitely still some very valuable areas of Facebook, things like groups and pages, as opposed to the general status updates where students still work together because everyone's got Facebook, everyone works collaboratively, and often a Facebook group is still a very effective way to do that. In terms of new things coming, I've had some interesting discussions with Matt, who's in the previous session, around new VLEs and the potential of those to be offering collaborative workspace and obviously a new communication tool. In Exeter, we're introducing a new portal in September that will have notifications. They will be pushed to mobile phones, and they will be visible to students as their sort of professional area. So I think you could almost try and look into the online-facing areas within the institution that are being developed and try and go from there. Otherwise, at the moment, Twitter and areas of Facebook is still very, very useful, I'd say.
I see the students very much as an ally to all of us here. I think that's the way to use it. But I think also there's a need for some reality, because the way I do it is what's wanted, which isn't the same as what's needed, and it certainly is not the same as what's achieved. And I wonder how you cope with those different things.
I guess that's the biggest fundamental difficulty that I face in my job and we face in being student representatives all the time, because obviously, as you say, sometimes there are unrealistic targets, but I think training is a massive, massive tool to try and combat that. So if there is a group of trained representatives, they should know that some things are unrealistic and they should know that they can work together on certain issues. Student unions tend to do a lot of that sort of training, and if there are a lot of unrealistic proposals coming through from the student body, then maybe speak to those that are giving the training, say, hey, we want to find out what students think about learning spaces, and we want to find out sort of the most practical things within a certain area that students think. And I think if you get in at that stage, before it's kind of blue sky, this is unachievable, or just set the students the parameters and say, what could you do, A or B, then I think that's one way to start looking towards it. Elaine, did you want to come in on that? A wish list. Yeah. That's great. If that's everyone, one more, couple more, okay.
An organisation such as mine has a whole range of students in lots of different ages. So we have some people doing their CPD point for minor positions, people in their short the level of technical ability and the amount of awareness of technology fluctuates wildly amongst that group. Is there any advice you kind of give about how to make sure that regardless of how into particular types of technology they are? I know a lot of our mature students have more in common with the touchscreen technology.
I think it's something that could be very, very divisive soon. And that was my key point, was please don't treat students all as the same, because that's a massively dangerous thing to go down. And if you are giving some students, because they are of an age range, a completely different experience to mature students, then that is really divisive and is something that could cause a lot of problems. I think the answers, it's a shame is Matt still here? No, I don't think so. I think curriculum design and also the face-to-face opportunities that every student gets with academics. I'm a massive advocate of that. I think if a student can still walk into an office and say, you know, I've got an issue with this, I want to work on it, and it is personal advice, it's not given to a massive lecture theatre, then I think that is the best way to do that. It's a massive ask in some institutions with student-staff ratios causing big, big problems. But I think if there is still an open door somewhere to discuss that individual issue, then that is one way to combat it. But at the same time, we shouldn't be running away without remember that there is every different type of student as well. Yeah.
I deal with our excuse me, GP, some people I'm teaching on a regular basis. And one of the things we discussed, the discussion goes on across each year with different GPs, is that we, in fact, SRC, the student representation, represent students. How good a representation actually is that?
Yeah, I think that is a completely legitimate question to ask at every stage. Is this evidence led? Is this representative really that of the whole body? And I would always stress in student unions that VPs and actual reps in every discipline are going in with some evidence, because otherwise it's very weak. At the same time, I think they generally are the most engaged. We have some of that in Exeter where we sometimes feel like we're always talking to the same 40 or 50 students as well, and they seem to be the ones that are really interested. And what about all the others? And that's why I'd say the combination of getting into the disciplines where the nuances are, trying to find the representatives from the disciplines is important, but at the same time, the informal meeting students as they walk past on the street, Twitter, Facebook, online surveying, and then I have no issue with focus groups either. I think sometimes that's something student unions shy away from, but I think in terms of this sort of exercise, a focus group is critical. So yeah, I think it's our eternal issue to manage, but I'd say that's one way to do it. Great, thanks very much. Cheers everyone.